Let's take a look at some charts on Tezos for Brave New Coin. So we'll start with the proof of stake comparison, Tezos in the green here. Now Tezos, unlike some of these other coins, was a proof of stake coin from the beginning. They have stakers, bakers, validators, master nodes, whatever you want to think of them as, sort of the traditional staking model. And they are fourth by market cap if you exclude ETH, which I am because it's not fully proof of stake yet. They're in the mix on fees, daily transaction volume, transactions per day, daily active addresses, git commits. I mean, they don't really stick out anywhere except for maybe transactions per day. And looking at these as a group doesn't make too much sense because they're all so different. So fourth by market cap and just in the middle of everything makes sense to me. There isn't sort of some bullish or bearish divergence that's sticking out. If we look at the My Tezos Baker list, you can see a list of all of the validators essentially. Really what I like to pay attention to is the exchange validators. A few months ago, I noticed Binance wasn't on this list. I still don't know if they just stopped staking, if they're planning on closing staking for Tezos. I believe it's still listed on their website as earning a yield. So I wasn't sure why they were off the website here. Maybe somebody can help me understand that a little better in the comments. Looking at transaction counts and fees, transactions are basically back to all-time highs. Fees, second highest ever. Now they've had a series of upgrades seamlessly. Governance is great, all that's great, but they're basically building empty cathedrals here compared to everything else. When you can think of them as an ETH killer, think of them as something, they've had time to catch up to ETH in that regard to attract dApps, NFTs, DeFi, blah, 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 blah. And it just, I don't personally see it. Maybe the Tezos community is aware of that situation. But when you look at Tezos versus ETH, people, you have to make that comparison. You just have to, because that's the world we live in. They're definitely different. They definitely have their own issues. I don't like to see fees rising as transactions are rising. That points to scalability issues, which I discussed heavily here, and they did some amendment to their protocol. Fees went way down. This isn't sustainable, really. Just look at ETH. I mean, ETH. The reason stuff like Tezos can survive long term is if ETH just crumbles under its own weight because of fees and inability to scale. So there will be some sort of Darwinian growth for these other chains that have sort of floundered their lead, being second, third movers, whatever you want to think of them as. Everybody in the community is going to promise ADA is the same, EOS is the same. You speak ill of the dead, and all of a sudden the zombies come out of the woodwork talking about how great the community is. But the truth of it is, just look at the metrics, look at the data. If there's no data, if there's no dApps, I don't even know where to look at for that sort of data. Something like 60 to 80% of the network is being staked. So to me, that's a huge indication that there's not much else to do with Tezos. I say that in every article for the past couple of years with Tezos. There's just nothing else to do with it. So if you can't use it as sort of your on-ramp to DeFi or dApps or whatever, it's basically just a speculative vehicle in its early stages, which is fine, but it's hard to convince people to buy and hold something when the party is happening next door on ETH and everybody's doing everything else on ETH, and not much is happening collectively on Tezos just yet. If we look at active addresses and NVT in the line here, active addresses in the fill, active addresses are at an all-time high, transactions are at an all-time high, so it's hard to be bearish on price when you see that on anything. NVT near all-time lows, so lots of on-chain activity. What I'd really like to do is exclude all of the staking addresses. If yes, it's an active address, but if we curate that further and we say, who's actually doing anything on Tezos and transacting other than staking, that'll give you the true economic activity, because this is sort of just baseline. Now I assume this is a big assumption, but I assume all of this is staking related activity. As active addresses increase, transactions increase. NVT as well continues to decrease, probably based on staking stuff, not necessarily anything else. Looking at Google Trends for Tezos over the past year, we're at an all-time high worldwide for that. So this makes sense based on where price sits on transactions, active addresses, Google Trends. Those are really the top three. that you care about for price or price sensitivity. I'm not going to talk about the amendments and the protocol stuff because at the end of the day, right now they're just building an empty cathedral. Nobody really cares. Let's be honest here. Let's be honest with ourselves. It's a speculative vehicle. It's for staking and earning interest. It had an advantage early on in that regard because it was one of the only proof of stake coins you could stake on an exchange, because at the end of the day, most people aren't going to stake off an exchange. That's just not going to happen. As much as the staking purists want people to do that, it's just too hobbyist, too inconvenient, in my opinion, to see a massive migration from staking on exchanges to staking elsewhere. Especially for new people who are buying crypto. They don't care, right? They don't care about your community. They just want to make a profit, right? And then they see, oh, I can earn interest here. Let's do it. Let's take a look at some technicals. We have the 50, 200 EMA, yearly pivots, VPVR, volume, RSI, open interest on Bitfinex. So open interest is basically 100% long right now. Longs have come off considerably since the all-time highs in longs, which were near 230, 250 in price. So my guess is anybody who was holding from that level, it was selling on the way up. At least that's how it appears. Now, price did hit an all-time high not too long ago, maybe a week ago or so. You could draw some sort of fancy diagonal maybe on all three of these highs, on all these lows. You get some sort of channel, and you can say, I'm going to start buying higher lows. Maybe that's VPVR level at 277. Maybe it's the 200-day moving average at 277. Maybe it's the yearly pivot around 250. That looks like a decent buy zone, but overall it's ranged since 2020, whereas many other things have just done much better. So it's a tough pill to swallow, the Tezos hold, because it's not an attractive looking trend compared to everything else. We can say it's been bullish since earlier in the year. It had a nice little move, did all those things, but it's just overall doing quite poorly relative to everything else. So I like 250, I like 270, tons of support, confluence there. I would look for a bullish divergence on lower time frames on any lower lows. And I certainly expect everything in crypto just continue selling off over the next month. Really, March is just not a good month. Q2 is much better. So if anything, set some lower bids, revisit it in late March, see if those were hit, that sort of thing. Looking at the cloud, it is bullish overall on the daily. You had your bullish Kumo breakout early January. It's below the daily Kijun. It's very volatile, extremely angry looking. I mean, it's Eiffel Tower from its all-time high, right? It loves to do this massive range high stuff. I don't know if that's because of the staking stuff. So many people are just waiting to sell. I mean, that's just how it looks, right? They're just waiting to sell those highs every time. As soon as it makes an all-time high, they have to sell it. And that's, again, to me, that just says that's a product of the party's happening everywhere else. It's not happening on Tezos. I'm happy to sell every single high I can as soon as I can, because I'd rather put money elsewhere. I'd rather rotate into something else that is much more active. That's my own personal read on this situation. But trend-wise, it looks okay. It is above the 200 as well, so it's not like doom and gloom. It's just relative to everything else. It looks very sad. Here's the BTC pair. It had kind of a year-ish, basically we'll say 9 months in 2020 to pull away from the pack a little bit. It was heavily consolidating. In retrospect, you could say maybe this was like coffee and distribution, although I don't really think it fit that makeup on the daily. Nonetheless, it definitively broke below the 200, below the cloud, and wow, it just kept falling. Consolidating, bearish down, consolidating, attempting an inverted head and shoulders here that got denied, and you just get these crazy legs down. This doesn't give you confidence on this pair that this is a bullish knife catch, right? When you just see this extreme selling. It had a chance to reconsolidate. I mentioned this a couple of months ago, but it looked okay in these levels on this range because it had consolidated here twice before. Nobody cared about that, just kept selling. It retested the VPVR level and said, nope, kept selling. So this is, again, I'd revisit this in Q2. I don't think this is a buy here, even if this is the ultimate low. It just doesn't look good. You know, there's very little support down here. Yeah, that's hard. It's just, I have nothing to say about this chart. I'd revisit it in Q2, and there's a potential bullish Kumo breakout. Here's XTZ ETH pair, and same story, just late 2020, it got slaughtered by everything else. This looks slightly better than Tezos BTC does. It's at volume support here, which is recently established. Possible diamond bottom, just extreme volatility in a diamond shape here on the bottom. But you know, the trend wise, it doesn't look good until Q2. So I'd revisit all the alts Q2. I'd revisit all these pairs in Q2 just to see if it has a chance to start mean reverting to 44K. So, or 44,000 sats. I think that's what that is, which is kind of a 2x from here. So overall, despite the on-chain activity and Google Trends at highs, the technicals look mediocre and look ugly relative to everything else. And if you want to see how we are trading BTC and ETH, you can check out the on-chain Enzyme.finance dApp, where you can copy trade or contra trade, should that interest you. On the trades tab here, you can see everything I'm doing and when I'm doing it. And this is an ETH and BTC as well as USD long short type thing. So let me know what you think about Tezos in the comments below, and happy trading.